Good evening, and welcome to this special meeting of the Thackton School Board. Please rise for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'd like to announce that there were two executive sessions since we last met. One executive session held on January 20th, 2015 for matters of personnel, and another executive session held on January 27th, 2015, also for matters of personnel. By way of attendance, all board members are present except Ms. Shackelford, who had a conflict. So I'd like to actually change the agenda a bit and move into old business. An old business item 8.1, refunding the 2009A and 2010 GO bonds. So I'm going to ask for a motion to authorize the administration in conjunction with financing team to proceed with the refunding of those aforementioned bonds. Mr. Pellicano, as finance chair, anything you want to comment on this?
No, other than the finance team revisited this again most recently, and as everybody's aware, we've discussed this probably several times, I guess starting back as early as September. I think the finance team is currently very comfortable moving forward with the recommendation on the refunding and taking the savings immediately.
Sure. And just for clarification, this would equate to savings of about $200,000. Okay. Brenda, you want to make the motion?
I'd like to make a motion to approve the authorization of the administration to work with Public Financial Management Incorporated as financial advisor, Rhodes and Simons LLP as bond counsel, RBC Capital Markets as underwriter, and the local solicitor in conjunction with the refunding of the GO bonds Series A of 2009 and GO bonds Series of 2010 with a minimum net savings target of 2.0%.
There's a motion. Is there a second? Mr. Pellicano. So any discussion from the board? Okay, before we move on, since we did go out of order, I'd like to give the public opportunity to make comment on only this item. So if there's any resident of the district that likes to make a comment on this item. Okay, seeing none. And if there's no other discussion from the board, I'll ask for a vote. All those in favor? Opposed? 8-0 passes. Anything else? So we can revisit old business later if there's anything else there. So we'll move into guests and scheduled speakers. Dr. Zerbe.
Thank you. If I would please have the board move to the front rows. There are two presentations here this evening. Good evening. As part of the first presentation this evening, I'll be delivering a presentation on what we consider the donor giving wall. Okay, mouse click. As part of the Warrior Pride campaign, a campaign that started back in early October and into November, this phase of the Warrior campaign is really centered around what we consider phase 2 of the campaign. And as part of that, there's been a subcommittee of the original campaign fundraising committee that has worked hard with Angela Lynch and other members of our administration to come forward this evening and talk about the approval, hopefully this evening, of a donor recognition wall. And I just want to, as for a point of reference, I want to bring your attention to some areas here on the campus. You are looking at this picture here. This is a shot from the stadium field at the approximate location, which is about right here, of where the donor wall would be located. You need to know that over here is the press box for the stadium, and just in the middle between the proposed donor wall and the press box is the commons area where students, typically senior students and those with special privileges for accomplishments, get to have lunch served in this particular area. And this gets you a bird's eye view of the playing surface. If you take a look at over the second picture, you'll notice that, again, this is another shot from the field area, a little closer location of where this wall would be located. And lastly, down at the bottom here, this photo is a shot of how the current wall looks today, and then we want to take a look at how this wall might look in the future. The donor recognition wall, again, please ignore the lettering. We're not suggesting that we name the wall what's listed there or any other names that you might be able to read on the sign. But this is part of just an illustration of how we can turn this particular area into a memorial to those who have contributed so kindly to the effort of the field renovation project before us today. So essentially what we're recommending is that we have a giving wall that maybe is designated and titled above here. We also then take these plaques where, if you notice in this drawing here, there's little indentations into the bricks. We would then use that area to secure the plaques to those areas and then give recognition to the donor levels that were outlined in the Warrior Pride Phase 1 campaign. And I'll just read those off to you real quickly so you understand what I'm referring to. So essentially there are giving levels, or what are called donor clubs, for anywhere from visionaries, that's $250,000 or above, $100,000 to $249,000. They're the leaders clubs, and so on and so forth. It goes all the way down to the $5,000 to $9,990, which is the Warrior fans. And those individuals, it is the belief of the Phase 2 committee and their recommendation that they be recognized on a plaque. It also then is the belief of the Phase 2 committee that donors of an amount of $1,000, and this is just another example, that donors of at least $1,000 or more in one installment will also receive recognition on this wall. Today, it's very difficult for us as a team working through this process to tell you exactly how this will unfold as we are ramping up the contribution efforts. Certainly, we want to be able to fill the entire wall as much as we can, but today we are just setting the groundwork for the opportunity that lays before us so that we can prepare ourselves as part of the Phase 2 of the giving to offer the opportunity for those who do give the $1,000 in a single installment or pledge $5,000 or more over a series of payments to be recognized. Secondly, these donations of $5,000 or more are recognized in what are called the donor clubs, which I just mentioned to you. And thirdly, the individuals who donate $1,000 to $499 could be recognized with names inscribed on a series of plaques or on a larger wall selection. So a series of plaques would reference something similar to this or something similar to this. And lastly, the rough overall cost estimate for this donor recognition wall should not, in our estimate, should not exceed $20,000. And that would include things like, for the large plaques, be about $3,000 each. Individual name recognition areas, about $9,000. There's some cleanup that needs to occur on this wall, as you notice. There's some cosmetic work that needs to be done. We want to remove some or any of the other remnants of product hanging off the building, if at all possible. And we want to make this really an opportunity to pay tribute to those that have made this field project a reality. So with that said, again, this is a concept. We're looking for the board to provide authorization for us to move forward with the concept and the planning. Our most important effort at this is to get your approval for the location, for the concept, and then we will do our due diligence to look for a donor or donors to help us fund the particular improvements that we plan to make here. That's all I have for this presentation on the donor wall. What I'd like to do now, if it's okay with the President, is I'd like to introduce the next presentation, and then we can take questions on this matter and the matter after me when we're back at our seats. So on March 11th of 2014, the Finance Committee of the Board, on March 11th of 2014, the Finance Committee of the Board discussed many issues. One of them, the need for an independent study on enrollment and capacity in the district. This discussion led to a committee recommendation and approval on April 22nd, 2014, to proceed with an independent study on this matter. On January 20th, 2015, the Pennsylvania Economy League, a highly respected name in this field, presented their findings to the board and the public. This information is located on the district website. This evening, we have the second part of this study, which deals with the capacity of district buildings. So this evening I have a gentleman by the name of Jim Thompson, who is a school architect and educational facilities planner, here as part of the Pennsylvania Economy League study to present his findings. Jim?
Good evening. Our team assembled information on a district-wide study in three basic parts. On January 20th, the Pennsylvania Economy League presented a demographic analysis. This evening, we're going to focus on the educational assessments, school capacity analysis, which includes a comparison of the capacity of each of your schools versus the enrollment and the projected enrollment from Pell, and a facility condition assessment of each of your buildings. At a future presentation, we'll look at cost-saving options, but for tonight, we're going to focus on the three areas in green in the middle. Our presentation this evening is organized by grade level configuration. Grades K to 4 will present projected enrollment versus the school capacity and summarize the condition of the individual schools. And then we'll go by grade configuration 5 to 6 at Skyview, 7 to 8 at Arcola, and 9 to 12 here in the high school complex. First, in the K4 grade configuration, the school capacity for the 5 existing elementary schools, and I'll compare that to the enrollment that was presented in 3 data points. The first is the current school year, 14-15. The second is the 5th year, which is looks ahead to the 2019-20 time frame, and the 10th year to 2024-25. There are 5 existing elementary schools that are configured half-day kindergarten through grade 4. And I've included a little bit of additional information on this slide. The first is the school capacity based on the number of regular classroom sections found at each of the 5 elementary schools. For example, Arrowhead has a capacity of 400 students based on the number of teaching stations currently in regular classroom. Underneath each of the buildings is the number of regular full-size classrooms that are currently used not for regular classrooms but for either special education or pupil support services. So you can see at Arrowhead we rate the capacity at 400, and there are 12 full-size classrooms that are currently in use for special education and pupil support services. Audubon, 500 students and 4 full-size classrooms, and so on. So that the total for, based on the number of sections, which in this case, district-wide totals 2,225 students. We compare that number versus the K-4 enrollment with the current enrollment for the 14-15 year at 1,733 students. We show a decline. These are directly from the Pennsylvania Economy League numbers that you saw on January 20th. In year 2019 to 20 is a decline to 1,644, and then a small decline from the 5th year to the 10th year to 1,590. And then we show some charts. I'm going to spend a little bit of time describing this chart on the next slide. The difference between 2,225 capacity versus 1,733 students in the current year is an excess capacity of 492 students. That excess capacity grows to 581 by the 5th year. And this is just a blow-up of that diagram. The 2225 number shown at the top, it's there somewhere. There we go. This is the 2225 number. The red line is the enrollment year by year by year. So there's 1733, 5th year 1644, 10th year 1590. There'll be a number of charts like this, and they're all in the same basic configuration. We show a second line on this chart, and the second line is showing the same number of sections. The school district has a preference to keep the class size at the elementary level to 22 students or lower. So you're not pushing the 25 student per class limit right now. In fact, you're comfortably at or below 22 students per classroom. And while the excess capacity in the first year is 492 students, the difference for 22 students per classroom is actually 225. And when you spread that over 5 schools, that's not a lot of leeway of excess capacity measured school by school. And in the case of the elementary schools, as you saw in one of the previous slides, there are a lot of classrooms that are dedicated to special education and pupil support services, and that number varies based on the elementary school. And we believe from our assessment of the schools that some of those pupil support services and special education rooms can be consolidated so that you still have adequate special ed and pupil support service, and you have equitable facilities and programming across the district, but we believe that you can achieve 4 sections per grade level at all 5 of your elementary schools. That would be 500 students per school. So we do think that if you tighten up on the programming in the individual schools, that capacity number would be reflective of a higher number of students that could fit within your existing facilities. 2 areas that we want to emphasize. One is that when we look at adding students to any school, is we always would look to confirm that the food service, today food service that tends to spread out, and we try to keep the food service in as few sections as possible. And by that I mean we don't want to start lunch too early and end lunch too late, because that's also disruptive for the students. And we would look to confirm that there's both serving capacity and seating capacity in each of the cafeterias. Similarly, there are 5 special subjects offered at this K-4 level: vocal music, instrumental music, library, phys ed, and art. And we would confirm that in each of your schools, frankly, each of your schools has all 5 of those at an appropriate level. And just to review, if we were to add 4 classrooms of space to Arrowhead, it would have to come out of the number of special ed and pupil support classrooms. That would still leave 4 full-size classrooms that would be available for special ed and pupil support services. Keep in mind that 4 of those 8 full-size classrooms would include the 4 modular classroom buildings that are attached to the back of the existing Arrowhead facility. Audubon has 4 full-size classrooms, and it's currently rated at 500 students already, keeping in mind that 2 of those 4 full-size classrooms also are modular classrooms. But you can see for the 3 newer elementary schools, Eagleville, you'd still have 6 full-size classrooms. Woodland, you'd still have 6 full-size classrooms. And Worcester, 7 full-size classrooms. So district-wide, a more realistic number for the capacity of the total of all your schools, you could probably fit about 2,500 students into the schools and still have plenty of space left over for special ed and pupil support services. And this tells a little bit different story. Now this is versus 2,500 students. So although you don't have this many sections in your schools, I think that it's pretty clear that even at 22 students, we show an excess capacity of 467 students, and that's at 22 students per section in your school. So there are none of the enrollments in the schools exceed 467 students. So that's really, although it's distributed amongst the 5 elementary schools, there's quite a bit of excess room that could be recaptured in some beneficial way. The condition of those K-4 schools: first, Arrowhead. These are simply in alphabetical order. We rated Arrowhead Elementary School at fair to good. There are issues with accessibility within the building. Certain things need to be upgraded to give full barrier-free access to all areas of the building. The mechanical system, this building was designed, I believe, in 1971. The mechanical electrical system is original to that date without major renovations. There are certainly opportunities for energy upgrades to improve the operating cost of the building, but the building is coming due, I'm going to say within a 5-year time frame. Is the district could be looking at a renovation cost that's similar in scale to the investment that the district made in the Woodland Elementary School. The roof needs to be replaced sooner than that. There are masonry issues on this building with some spalling of the existing brick and masonry restoration needed around the building. The windows need to be replaced, and these, you can see one of the 4 modular classrooms. One of the 4 modular classrooms you can see in the photo here. These are in pretty rough shape. They're at an age where even the exterior of these require work. Audubon is also in fair to good condition. Also has some accessibility issues, mechanical system upgrades, masonry restoration, window replacement. NIT 2 has modular classrooms. Those modular classrooms are in somewhat better shape than these, but at Arrowhead, there's actually an interior corridor that connects to the 4 modular classrooms. At Audubon, the students actually pass through a fenced enclosure that's open to the environment to get from the building to 2 modular classroom buildings. Not ideal. The other 3 buildings are good to new condition. Eagleville is the newest of the buildings. Woodland is the most recent renovation. So in terms of architectural standards for Methacton School District, is Eagleville and Woodland provided an architectural standard for comparison purposes, and suggests that if you certainly could spend $10 million doing a full renovation of Arrowhead and Audubon. And if you saw that expense as something that could be on the horizon maybe 5 years down the road, that's a good comparison number to bring those buildings to the same architectural standard that we see at Woodland today. All right, moving on to grade 5-6, the capacity of the 5-6 is rated similarly to the K-4. It's operated as an elementary school, and as such, to determine the capacity of the building is proportional to the number of regular classrooms available. At the 5th grade level, Methacton School District operates 6 teams of 3 sections. And so that's 18 sections currently, but we believe that using the same logic as we used in the K-4, that the first floor of the building could hold up to 7 teams of 3 sections by tightening up and consolidating some of the pupil support and special education services. On the 6th grade level is currently operating 4 teams of 4, that's 16 sections. But again, we believe that through tightening up and consolidation, that you could operate up to 5 teams of 4. 5 teams of 4 is 20, 7 teams of 3 is 21, 41 sections times 25 kids per section. That's how we derive the capacity number of 1,025. So it's not mystery math as to how we come by these numbers, and it is related in this case to the way that we would analyze any elementary school. Current enrollment at the 5-6 level, the 2 grades combined, 802 students. Pennsylvania Economy League shows a decline to 770 students at year 5 and 711 students at year 10. A similar graphic, we show an excess capacity of 223 students in the current year. That increases slightly to 255 in year 5 and 314 at year 10. And taking a closer look to this, what we're showing as the lower number here is actually the current number. You notice that the upper limit is based on our assessment that we could add more teams. That's 41 sections at 25 students. However, you're currently operating 34 sections within the building. So if you take as an ideal that you would operate the number of sections today at 22 students per section, is you can see that the red line that shows the 5-6 enrollment over the next 10 years, although it's not as smooth a declining trend as we've seen at the elementary level, it still is pretty close to the 34 sections at 22 students. And this would give you some opportunities to either increase the number of students per section or to decrease the number of sections or teams offered within these schools. So recapturing space within the 5-6 facility, if we needed to fit more kids within that in future scenarios, one opportunity that we see within the building is there are 3 very nicely outfit science labs that are sign-out science labs that are regularly used by the science classrooms. Those rooms are not assigned currently. They're used like some of the computer labs in the building as sign-out resources for any teacher to use. Those labs could be used as regular science team rooms, and with use of an outfitted science lab as negotiated with that teacher. Another scenario that I mentioned on the last slide was to reduce the 5th grade in particular from 6 teams of 3 to 5 teams of 3, simply by increasing the number of students per section. And the third strategy might be to use floater teachers. There are very few opportunities at the 5-6 level for floater teachers. Health would be an example of one that could fit within the space of a regular ed teacher during a planning period, for example. But that would require scheduling, and you'd have a health teacher as an itinerant moving from room to room. As was true at the K-4 level, we really couldn't look at expanding the enrollment within this building without carefully considering the cafeteria. The cafeteria, not so much in terms of serving, but in terms of seating, is tight in this building already. And also to confirm special subjects, and the example is the picture here, is there's one gym on the 5-6 side, and that phys ed, the sections of phys ed are maxed out today. So there would have to be some strategy for expanding physical education if you wanted to bring in additional enrollment into this facility. This is a beautiful building. The building's brand new. It has no identified construction needs in the building. 7-8 is in Arcola Intermediate School. We rate the capacity of Arcola at 1,105 students. And I'd like to make a couple of comments, although just about the philosophy of how to count capacity for secondary schools. In Pennsylvania, K-6 is termed elementary grade levels, 7 to 12, secondary grade levels. When we rate the capacity of a secondary school, is we consider more than just the regular classroom. So this school also has multidisciplinary teams. In this case, there are 3 7th grade teams. There are 3 8th grade teams. But there are also some electives in the building, and those electives are also regular classrooms. For example, the planetarium and the literature classroom, those are not team rooms, those are independent of the multidisciplinary teams. But in addition, there are a broader range of specials that are offered to these intermediate school students: health and phys ed, art, music, technology education, and family and consumer science. At the secondary level, we count all of those occupancies as capacity toward the building, and that is all factored by what we call a utilization rate. The utilization rate is designed to factor the difficulty in scheduling an individual room for 100% of the day. And we'll talk about the utilization rate and what would be an appropriate utilization rate for this building in a later slide. Now compare that to the current and projected enrollment. The Pell analysis was 777 students in the current year, declining at year 5 to 731, and declining slightly in the 10th year to 703. In the current year, that is an excess capacity of 328, increases to 374 at year 5, and slightly to 402 at year 10. Now let's take a closer look at that and talk about utilization rate. The planning number that many educational facility planners use for secondary schools is 85%. And as an example, at Arcola Intermediate School, you have 7 instructional periods. The specials, so phys ed, health, art, music, tech ed, and family and consumer science, those teachers offer 6 instructional periods in the 7-period day. That's 86%. So if every room was utilized like that, your utilization rate would be 86%. However, the regular ed teachers, so in this case it's the 3 teams, multidisciplinary teams at 7th grade and the 3 teams at 8th grade, they instruct 5 periods out of 7. So those rooms are empty 2 periods a day. That's 71%. So short of a change in philosophy in how these rooms are scheduled or how teachers share rooms, I calculate that you can about hit a 75% utilization rate without making some significant changes in the way the spaces are used in this building. While the excess capacity in the building I rate at 328, that would require some changes in the way you offer programming. I think 75% is a more realistic utilization number for Methacton School District, and the excess there is 195. And notice that we started to see this at the 5-6 level is you're not seeing a consistent downward trend, as you're still seeing bubbles of students that are coming through the district, that you don't consistently just decline in enrollment. Is as these bubbles move through, as you'll notice there was a bubble at the 5-6 level, then that bubble reappears 2 years later in the 7-8, and you'll see it again when we get to the high schools. You'll have these bubbles as we no longer at these higher grade levels have the luxury of seeing a factor of safety here. I'll call it a factor of safety where if you have a little excess capacity today, that's great because the downward trend is going to help you over time to sort of shrink into tighter space. You're susceptible here to having some of these bubbles are predictable in the first 5 years, but that second 5 years it gets harder and harder to predict the magnitude and amplitude of that curve. Now, how could we recapture some of that space? How about some strategies there? Well, there's more opportunity there for floater teachers. And as examples, there's a literature classroom and 3 health classrooms that are, 2 of them are converted science labs that weren't needed for science. Those classrooms could be assigned to as regular classrooms, and the floater teachers could be using those when we have 2 periods a day for the multidisciplinary team rooms. Now, where do those teachers go when floater comes into a team teacher's classroom? This building does not have identified instructional planning centers. So as we'll see at Methacton High School, here in this building, you have departmentally organized instructional planning centers. So when the English teacher needs to give up a room during a planning period, they can go to the English team instructional planning center. You don't have that at Arcola, so some of the gains that you could pick up by using floater teachers is we're probably going to lose some space to instructional planning centers just to have places for floater teachers to hang up a coat. There are opportunities at Arcola to consolidate for and still have adequate special education and pupil support classrooms. As an example, there is 1 dedicated classroom per team. We would have to rethink how special education and pupil support services are offered at Arcola to consolidate some of that classroom space. Also, there are computer labs that are sign-out computer labs. There's no instruction offered in those labs, but in a secondary school, computer labs are typically given capacity. That's an example of an area that could have instruction offered, but those rooms are reserved. And we saw the same thing to be true at the 5-6 side for the sign-out science labs. If there was a use for these computer labs rather than as sign-out labs. That means that those computer labs would be occupied. Those computer labs are very valuable as adjunct to the adjacent to the source, the library. The last item here is confirming the serving and seating. As we'll see at the high school, is the seating in the cafeteria expands into any adjacent common area, as the type of table that's used in the cafeteria tends to take up more room. We would have to confirm, if we wanted to add enrollment to this building, that we can fit the students in a regular time period that's acceptable and not be extending lunch either early or late for student food service. The school itself is in good physical condition. There are some masonry restoration needs, primarily on what I'll call the back of the building, is the area, well, I guess it all faces the woods. The back of the building is, there are some areas back by the loading docks particularly that have some repairs that are required, some steel lintels that are corroding, and sealant joints that need to be replaced. When this building was renovated in the recent 5-6 edition, not all mechanical electrical equipment was replaced on this side. So you're still seeing isolated situations in this building where a piece of mechanical or electrical equipment will reach the end of its useful life and need to be replaced. That provides opportunities for the school district to make replacements and save operating or energy costs by going to higher efficiency equipment. The high school, we rate the capacity at 1,949 students, using a very similar methodology to the methodology at Arcola. Current enrollment is 1,662. Fifth-year projection is about 100 less at 1,565. 10th year is another 60 less at 1,505. Excess capacity today, 287, keeping in mind that that assumes an 85% utilization rate in the building. Fifth year, 384 students. 10th year, 444 students. 287, when the numbers are this big, the current enrollment is 1,662. We assessed the capacity at 1,949. While that looks like there are 287 students, still the utilization rate in the building is still a function of the district's ability to schedule instructional uses into each of those individual classrooms, and the school is much more a 75% utilization rate, but that could be increased by increasing floater teachers, utilizing the departmental instructional planning centers that are already in place, with the caveat that we've already expanded into the student commons for senior lunch and for honors lunch today. So we know that at all of your buildings, the food service tends to expand into a more generous seating area in particular. The high school itself is in good condition. Similar to Arcola, as the mechanical, electrical, plumbing system was not comprehensively replaced, so there are always pieces, even major pieces of mechanical, electrical equipment that needs to be replaced from time to time as they reach the end of their useful life. There is a need for some masonry restoration particularly on the stadium side of the building, and there are two modular classroom buildings that are in pretty rough shape also on the stadium side of the building. This provides what I would like to refer to as a foundation of knowledge, and you can see that We're thinking about strategies for how we could aggregate some of the excess capacity. There's clearly excess capacity in all of your grade level configurations. It's finding ways to aggregate enough of that excess capacity to make it useful to save money for the school district. There's no point in making changes if we can't find ways to better utilize the resources for the benefit of the kids in the district without affecting a already successful educational program. And I'll address any questions you might have.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Zerbe. Thank you, Jim, for the presentations. I will now open the floor to board questions, and let's handle the capacity study first, and we can circle back to the giving wall later. So, any questions for Jim on the capacity study? Mr. McFarley?
Jim, you mentioned as you went through the various buildings, you know, a comparison between 75% utilization and 85%. I just wondered in your work with other school districts, you know, where that number actually tends to fall on average. Is it closer to 75 normally, or is it closer to 85, or in the middle?
Well, let me just say that 85% is achievable. That's a commonly used number. You happen to have the luxury of space here at Methacton School District, and necessity being the mother of invention is when the pressure is off, the educators will use those resources to the best of their ability, and you expect that from them. Unless there is some pressure to occupy space, and you could look at, forget about the high school for a minute, let's go back and look at the elementary schools, is you have one elementary school, Audubon, that operates successfully with 4 full-size classrooms. You have another elementary school, Arrowhead, also operates successfully with 12 vacant spaces. Now, if I walk through the school, there are no vacant rooms, so I wouldn't walk by a room and say, geez, there's no furniture in here, this one's vacant, I can use this for something. So you would have to willfully if you had reasons why you wanted to use the space in the high school, then you would pressurize the system to say, well, you're absolutely going to have to get out of your classroom for 2 periods a day and go to the instructional planning center. You know, the faculty doesn't like that, and if the space is available, they certainly, because it is disruptive. But there are plenty of schools. I did a major project on the other end of the state for Upper St. Clair School District, and I was the project manager for their high school project. And at the outset of their project, they decided that the teachers were not going to own those classrooms, but they didn't do a small instructional planning centers. They had these big instructional planning centers that could provide desk space for literally every teacher in the school has a desk space in an instructional planning center. Well, you know, their utilization rate is great, but they also lost a lot of square feet to instructional planning centers. So that's not necessarily, having a high utilization rate is not necessarily the most efficient use of the space either. There's a level of pressure that you can put into the schools and fit teachers into those instructional planning centers without having a rebellion among your faculty. And in this case, at the high school, there certainly is room in instructional planning centers. At Arcola, there are no instructional planning centers. So first is you would have to kind of go back and rethink how to accommodate the teachers so they can be efficient when they're not in their classroom. So, I'm not sure that I answer your question, but I will say this, is I think that you can move your utilization rate up at the high school because you already have the infrastructure in place. I think that it would be difficult to do that at Arcola without a change of philosophy and the way they do pupil support services and the total lack of instructional planning centers. So it would be more difficult in my mind to increase the utilization of Arcola than it would here at Methacton High School.
Other questions? Mr. Pellicano?
Jim, is there any commentary you could add on the configuration that we use here with K-4, 5, 6, 7, 8 high school, and how that's up, and what you've seen in your travels versus other school districts, and based on our configuration, does that present for us any opportunities or challenges?
You have, the one thing I will say that is distinctive in my mind at Methacton School District is you have all of your elementary schools are about the same size. And the constraining factor on the size of the elementary school is that they're all around 500 students. So you can only fit a certain number of sections in each of those elementary schools, and as a result, it's difficult to expand the capacity of those schools. In many ways, you've replicated that in the 5-6 facility, because instead of having two elementary schools, in this case 5 elementary schools at 500 students each, now you have a 5-6 building that has 2 floors, but each floor is about 500 students each. And the same thing at Arcola, each floor is around 500, 550 students each. So the vessels that you have to put enrolled students into are all very similar in size. So you lack that kind of flexibility to be able to say, what can I do with this, in this case with the grade configuration, where you don't have either classes that are split, like half a 6th grade in one place, half a 6th grade in another, or elementary schools where you can't quite fit 4 sections, or you couldn't quite fit 3 sections of a particular grade configuration, so that the 500 capacity in each of these schools is constraining the flexibility on altering your grade configurations. If you looked at many other schools in the Commonwealth, it's not uncommon to find 900 student elementary schools or 600 student elementary schools. Those kind of size of schools are not uncommon. Very small schools are not uncommon. But I do find that it's a little rare to find a school district where everything seems to be the same size in every building. So you can fit roughly 1 grade level in a vessel the size of 500 students, or you could fit one of your K to 4 at 4 sections per grade. That fits in about 500. There are other grade configurations, and we would have to look at that in that way, is how many sections can you fit in a vessel the size of 500 students.
Additional questions? Ms. Woodring?
Yes, thank you. I'm struggling a little bit with, I think, what I think I heard you say about the capacity of the gym in Skyview. Mm-hmm. And what I think I heard you say was that that's pretty much maxed out with the student enrollment that we have there now. And so I'm struggling, I guess, a little bit to understand, you know, if we have underutilized space in the classroom areas, and we decide, well, we need to use that, then we have to do something with gym time, gym space, gym something. And I don't know whether I heard you say anything about the gym capacities over in Arcola, which it seems like there's about the same amount of students on in both Skyview and Arcola.
Right. Now, well, let me just say, is there are three, the way Arcola functions is there are 6 faculty members at Arcola, and they split time between being health and phys ed. There are 3 spaces that are designated for health and 3 spaces that are designated for phys ed. So already you have 3 times the number of teaching stations that are assigned at the Arcola side, and they are utilized. Well, my concern at the 5-6 side is that it is so far remote from the 3 gyms and 3 health rooms on the Arcola side, is so remote from Skyview that it's difficult to even to look at, could we take the 6th graders, could we take the 6th graders and have them do phys ed on the Arcola side? Well, yeah, you could, but that's the phys ed classes walking to phys ed and back, because that's a long, I don't know how long that building is, but it's well over 1,000 feet. So it's, the 2 buildings are really designed to be separated. There's very little common area in the center that the students use in common from one side to the other.
Other questions? Ms. Hackett?
Following on the phys ed, you also mentioned the cafeteria being an issue on the Skyview and Arcola campus. And if we think about the total capacity in those schools, that doesn't take into account the use of the cafeteria. Is that right? And so then is it fair to say that the capacity is as high as you reported?
Well, yes. You always have the option to go to more lunch sections, although that's not the most desirable. It's always possible to add more lunch sections, start earlier and later. The way the furniture is configured in the modern cafeteria is very different. If you are a fan of the Back to the Future movies, there's a scene in Back to the Future 1 where Marty and Biff square off in the cafeteria, and it's a sea of children. It's chaos. And when the 2 of them start a fight, the whole room goes silent. And then the paper airplane goes by the principal, and it goes back to chaos. And that's the problem, was they had the long cafeteria tables, and those cafeterias were chaos. So we've shifted, and we've gone to the round tables, and it's much more of a, it's a break from chaos. It's supposed to be a place to go and get a break from the stress of class. So we've gone to the round tables, and it's a more relaxed environment. You can always go to the long tables, but it tends to raise the volume in the cafeteria and the agitation level. So that's another option, would be just pack more kids into the cafeterias and do less sections.
We'll take your word on the Back to the Future reference, because I honestly can't remember that scene. But so are we saying that the cafeteria issue is merely a furniture issue? Or is it literal, there's not enough space? Or is it, if you
it would just require a more careful look. Is like we've suggested some strategies. Is we certainly could go back. I would recommend that we would go back and just look at a table layout for the individual spaces. I mean, it's not really necessary for the way you operate today. So we didn't try and pack as many kids as we could. So we didn't go back, and I'm not recommending a table configuration or a lunch schedule, but we know that those are strategies that we could employ if we had more kids in the building. Now, how many kids is too many kids? Well, you know, we could you could task us to go back and say, I want to know how many kids will fit in that cafeteria.
Can I follow up on that?
Yes.
So if we increased the seating capacity in either or both Arcola and Skyview, when would we reach the capacity in the kitchen problem?
Well, that's another question. It's usually the constraining factor is not the kitchen, it's the serving area. And that goes back to the elementary schools as well. As a 500-student school, many of those schools have a single serving line. It's usually the time that it takes to get through the serving line. In the case of the Skyview in Arcola, it's not just a straight serving line. If there's I just don't recall if it's a food court scatter type serving, that takes longer. So it's more related to and you'll see on my slides, as I say, it's both the seating and the serving. So you have to be able to get the kids through the serving line efficiently so that they don't literally run out of time getting their food and have no time left to eat.
Thank you. Other questions? Anyone else down there? Yeah.
Sorry, can I just... I know you already said it, but I think I missed the number that you gave. When you showed the Arrowhead and Audubon saying that they were the only two that were good to fair, you had a cost associated with fixing them?
Yeah, I didn't actually put the number on the slides, but I can tell you looking back to the pre-planning for the Woodland project, it was clear that the Woodland project, the pre-planning for that was approximately $200 a square foot. So, you're looking at $200 a square foot for construction cost and saw course. Now, that was just a planning number. I didn't have the actual construction number at Woodland, but I'll bet you spent $200 a square foot and more on that building. It's lovely. That's the architectural standard, and I would look at that and say, well, if you were going to completely redo either or both of these two buildings, we should be looking at that. The one building, I believe, is 55,000 square feet, and the other one's 56.6. So you're looking in that range, $10, $12 million as a planning number. And as these things go, one of the questions is, well, you don't have to spend that money, but the day is going to come when you're spending money on replace the roof at Arrowhead, the interior finishes, or you have the boilers go, or whatever it is you do it by 1,000 cuts, or you organize and breathe new life into an Arrowhead or an Audubon and spend the $10 to $12 million. And that's in today's dollars. We happen to be in a non-inflationary period, so we kind of refer to these things like, oh, well, it's, if it was $10 million 5 years ago, it's probably still $10 million today. That will not always be true.
But to clarify, so the $10 million, $10 to $12 million would be to basically, I don't want to say gut, but renovate the building to this.
Let's call it woodlandize.
Woodlandize. Okay,
yeah.
Very good. That's not to address to your point, the 1,000 cuts of the roof and the AMA requirements and other things that would have to be done in advance of woodlandizing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
I believe that computer labs, they are not counted as capacity, or they are?
Your computer labs in your school are conspicuously unscheduled for construction or for instruction, and that starts at the K to 4 level. I believe that all of your elementary schools actually have one of those rooms that's designated as a computer lab, but I don't think that you offer instruction in those rooms. It's like the science labs at Skyview. It's a lovely resource that is a great asset for the teachers to be able to reach out and bring their kids in if they want to do a classroom research project, but no instruction at K to 4. There are 2 computer labs at the 5 to 6. Those are not used for instruction, but the library media room is right next to one of the labs. The computer labs at the 5-6 do not have windows. The Arcola, same thing, as I believe there are 2 or 3 computer labs that are right there by the library, and they're sign out. So, there are not course offerings. They're not offering. There are some course offerings that have sprung up at the high school for computer programming. So, could you anticipate that such a thing would be offered in the future? Well, I think anybody would would think, well, maybe those computer labs will be, you could do computer science kind of stuff, programming and what have you, coding in the future.
Well, also as technology progresses and we move to, iPads and, and the district implements its BYOD policies. And things
Right,
like that.
right.
And prior to Skyview, those computer labs in the elementaries did not exist for all intents and
Right.
purposes. So,
Right.
so you did not use those rooms as capacity.
No,
Okay, thank you.
no, they're included. When you see those numbers, like 12 rooms at Arrowhead, one of those 12 is the computer lab. Yeah,
Okay.
that's true at each of the schools.
Thanks.
Thanks. Additional questions? Mr. Phillips?
Jim, good evening. As I said in previous meetings, I like looking at the past before going forward for what we've learned. Looking back at my notes back 2007, 2008, school district was projecting enrollments in their study of 6,500 students, and the public was out saying that the birth rates were declining and that we shouldn't build the schools. With that being said, going forward, could you give us a synopsis of if we change any configurations of the school district, as far as the 2 townships that are in our district, how many houses would they have to build for us to break that 15% cushion, or to go the other way, looking back, seeing that we made a mistake as a district building something that gave us all this extra room. So here's the opposite effect that I'm worried about. So if you have a synopsis of each township and what their probable building or practices would be, that'd be great.
Well, let's start with the, really at least part of the question that you're asking was related to the presentation on January 20th, and the trend for the number of residents per household is declining. So part of the demographic analysis was to analyze, even in a situation in the community where the community might be increasing in population, you can still be declining in enrollment because of the factors of the changing demographic within an individual home on average. So a lot of the answer to, I believe a lot of the answer to your question is related to the trend line on number of people per residence, and that certainly is out of my area of primary expertise. That's a better question for Pell.
Yeah, it was about a 0.34 students per household.
Right.
And the concern is whether or not the townships, if they build out, from my understanding, Lower Providence is near being built out. Worcester, who knows there. But how many houses or how many students would we have to have that we'd be concerned that that 15% would be not enough of a buffer, and we'd be looking at looking at more space in the future? Do you see that ever happening?
Short of a change of philosophy on development in Worcester, no. No, I don't. Is, the two factors, and again, you've caught me outside of my area of expertise, but the two factors that I recall from the demographic report to focus on here is, number one is number of the declining number of individuals per residence, and number two was the housing starts, and they analyzed both of those things. The turnover in housing is to go from empty nester type housing to young families type of housing, is that's an area of unknown within the district. It's unknown and unknowable. Is that would be a trend, in your business. Is I'm sure you would love to have lots of new kids coming into the district, but that is more typical of the disruption, is that you would start to have turnover as a demographic shift from empty nesters to young families that bring young load into the district that moves in to raise their families in at Methacton.
Other questions? Any other questions for Jim? Well, if there are no further questions from the board, I'll ask a final question. So, Jim, do you have a recommendation for us?
Yes, I do. First of all, recommendation is based on the information provided to you on current and projected enrollment. You saw that on January 20th. The information provided this evening on excess capacity and current facility conditions and projected cost to renovate both Arrowhead and Audubon elementary schools. It is my recommendation that the Methacton Board of School Directors consider the possible closing of Audubon Elementary School and/or Arrowhead Elementary School as part of a school consolidation plan. Moreover, if it's the desire of this Board of School Directors to consider this, you should direct the superintendent to schedule and advertise for a hearing to consider this matter, as those school closure issue is constrained by regulation.
Thank you. I'll turn it over to the solicitor to explain how that process would work.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. There's about a 6-month time period of activity that has to take place to properly close a school, and it would be for your consideration along each of these steps as to whether you wanted to proceed. The first step would be that at least 15 days prior to a board hearing, there would be a published notice in the newspaper of a hearing to consider closing the particular schools. And that's what you're considering tonight, is whether you're going to publish that notice of hearing, and whether you're going to authorize the superintendent to do that. Between the publication and the actual hearing itself, there's a 15-day window. It must be at least 15 days. Step number 2 would be to hold a board hearing. This would be members of the administration would present in some measure the issue. And the school may not be closed during a school term unless the proposed action is previously approved by the Pennsylvania Department of Education. I understand we're not utilizing that procedure. In the hearing itself, it is a hearing open to the public. It is a hearing at which there will be public participation. There will be testimony under oath. Anyone who wishes to testify may certainly do that, and there will be a transcript of the hearing. So the members of the public can come, and we'll schedule the hearing on a particular night if it's your will to do that, and then continue the hearing to future nights as the case may be, depending upon how much public participation there actually is with respect to whatever it is that you're considering at that time. Step number 3 would be then, at the conclusion of the hearings, to wait 3 months after the board hearing before voting on the issue of whether to close a school or schools, as the case may be. During this period, the board should avoid and should not make any final decision on the issue. It's effectively a waiting period for you to consider and potentially even receive information concerning that. Step number 4, at a public meeting then, after the 3-month period, at a public meeting, you'll vote on the issue as to whether or not to close the school. The effective date of the closure should be no sooner than 60 days from the board vote. So from the time of the vote till the actual date of closure, there would be 60 days. In the event that there was a vote to close a school or schools, the superintendent must mail the Pennsylvania Department of Education School Services Office and provide notification of that closing, and it's a formal notification. And we've given Dr. Zerbe the information if that were to be the eventuality, along with our packet here. And then finally, number 6, we would have to provide written notice of the school closing to all temporary professional and professional employees who would be affected by the closing at least 60 days prior to the effective date of the closing. So that notice would be presented essentially at the time of the board vote as well. And that's the six-step process. As I indicated, it's about a 6-month process. If you look at it, it's 15 days initially, and then the hearing itself. Then there's 3 months, so that's effectively up to that point 3.5 months, and then 60 days on the end, which makes it effectively 5.5 months. And if you figure in the few days between each of these various things, it comes out to just about 6 months, a 6-month time period.
Thank you. Before I ask for a motion and we have further discussion, I did want to make a brief comment. The board commissioned these enrollment capacity studies in order to ensure that the district is operating in an optimal manner and that our current structure makes economic and educational sense. I'd like to stress that tonight no decisions are being made right now and that no schools are being closed tonight. The board is simply considering a recommendation from a recognized leader in this area. Should the board vote tonight to direct the administration to create a consolidation plan and schedule hearings to review the matter, we will follow a thoughtful and deliberate process as outlined by the Pennsylvania School Code. We'll get all the relevant information in front of the board and the public before any decision is made. Again, a vote tonight does not close a school. It merely directs Dr. Zerbe to prepare additional information for the board to consider. Anytime the words school and closing or consolidation are mentioned together, it is bound to cause angst and uncertainty. I'd like to ask that we try and keep the swirl to a minimum as we work through this. The board has an obligation to look at all the options before us. As we do that, in full public view, let's all do our part to remain focused on the reason that we're all here, the children. This board is committed to providing the absolute best educational experience possible for our students and to providing that experience in the most appropriate facilities available. We also take very seriously our role as stewards of the tax dollars of our neighbors and fellow citizens. Again, any decisions that are made tonight or in the future will be made with those precepts in mind. Having said that, I have a motion, and I'll ask for a motion to direct the superintendent to schedule and advertise a public hearing on the question of the possible closing of Audubon Elementary School and/or Arrowhead Elementary School. The public will be invited to attend and will be given reasonable opportunity to provide comments regarding the potential school closings. Is there a motion? Mr. Pellicano, is there a second? Ms. Hackett. Okay, before we get into any discussion on this, at this point, I'd like to offer the public the opportunity to comment on board action items. This is limited to residents of the district and only to items on the agenda for the board to take action on. That would be this vote now, that would be the early retirements, and that would be the donor recognition wall that we discussed earlier. There will be an opportunity for other comments later in the meeting. I'll ask that when coming forward, please state your name and general area of residence for the record, and that you keep your comments to no more than 3 minutes. And the board thanks you in advance for your cooperation. So is there any public comment on board action items tonight? Mr. Andrews.
John Andrews, Lower Providence. Mr. Nascimento, in your short statement there, you spoke about items being on the agenda. The item on the agenda is capacity study. It's not a motion to take immediate action. Maybe you don't understand what I'm saying. You spoke about the agenda. That's the yellow sheet available here. And, you know, on the other hand, I do applaud the board for getting to recognition of the excess capacity in the school facilities here. And a number of times I've indicated that the 5 elementary schools are bulwarks of the community. I said to someone within the week, suppose because of excess capacity, we were to close, let's say, the Worcester School, you would have 10,000 people up in arms. People in Worcester wouldn't be able to sell their homes. I mean, the reaction would be, chaos. You guys aren't at a round table. You're at a long table, like in the cafeteria in the movie Back to the Future. Now, in Bucks County, the elementary school system is K-6 everywhere in the county, and they get good educational results. There are lots of school districts with K-4 and 5-6 and 7-8 where the results are not so good, largely due to the school structure. One of the best schools in Philadelphia, I think, is K-12. So I think one thing that needs to be studied here is looking at making the K-4s into K-5s. Now, one aspect of that is, well, what do we do with the empty building Skyview if we make Arcola 6, 7, and 8? Well, I think that's a worthy thing to study. It should not be dismissed out of hand because it's a new building. And the presentation that Mr. Thompson gave this evening seemed to be focused on how can we fit more students in this, that, and the other school. It seems like he was given the task of saying, well, we're going to close 2 schools in Lower Providence, and how can we fit those students in somewhere else in the scheme of things?
Thanks, John. John,
with regard to the 3 minutes, for the umpteenth time since you've been president, there is no time limit according to the Sunshine Act on items to be voted on.
Thank you, Mr. Andrews.
It's separate for the courtesy of the floor.
Thank you.
So I think, I fail to understand why you put the 3-minute limit on when you have a room full of people who probably have nothing to say.
To have a chance to comment. Thank you.
Are you saying?
Anything else for courtesy? Anything else for board action items comment? Candy.
Candy Alaba, Eagleville Road, Eagleville. I wasn't able to make the last meeting where the enrollment projections were given to the board, but I think I remember in November I stood here and stated what the enrollment projections were in 2007 from a fact, which were 6,500 students, which has been wrongly reported in articles. It was 6,500 students. We now have, 4,974? This has been told to the board continuously for the last 9 years that our enrollment's gone down. Yeah, I'm angry that now all of a sudden this is an issue. 2 years ago in Woodland Library, Howard Jones said you would have to look at closing at least 1 school. My recommendation, which is free, because I don't know how much this study cost, Mr. Andrews has been giving enrollment studies for years, and he's been kind of spot on with the enrollment. My suggestion is close Arrowhead and Audubon. Make the elementaries kindergarten through 5th. Take the 6th graders and put them back in Arcola, which in 2008, a capacity study was done for Arcola, and it was 80% at that time in 2008. Put the 6th graders back in. Take Audubon and Arrowhead and put them in Skyview, because Skyview can hold a whole lot of children. And then we will still be using the building that is costing us millions of dollars in debt. Now we're going to look at debt. I don't know, I think he said $10 million to fix the schools that are falling apart. Aren't any of you upset that Eagleville is 13 years old, 12, 13 years old? Their roof is leaking, their library windows are leaking. Either the school hasn't been maintained properly, or we had a shoddy contractor. This should be making the school board upset. You're going to want to come back to the taxpayers and say you need to take out another bond to fix the schools when you should have been worrying about the schools for the last 3 years. Instead, you were worried about getting a football field in. and borrowing money to put in a football field to keep our students safe. We have hundreds of students in these buildings. We had an electrical contractor stand here and show us what shape the buildings are in. This upsets me. I mean, I don't want to see anyone's child get hurt and then we're stuck with a massive lawsuit. And you're going to come back to the taxpayers and want to raise our taxes. Because right now it's the teacher salaries are killing us, pensions are killing us. We don't need houses to build it in this school district. We need houses to be filled in this school district. We have more homes in foreclosures. We're going to have more this year because apparently you're having trouble collecting a property tax. So you have a serious problem. And you can't keep coming back to us taxpayers. We can't afford it. But I'm upset that these buildings are falling apart. What did Mr. Jacoby do for 20 years? What exactly was he doing? But you were and if, all except for Mr. Phillips, if you would have been present from 2007 at all these meetings about Skyview, when the people that spoke out against it were insulted and ridiculed, I was called names, I got phone calls at home because I spoke out against, and you know what? I'm going to actually stand here and pat myself on the back that I was right all along, that was a multi-million-dollar mistake. And now it's on the head of the taxpayers, and you people have to wake up and do something. You have to be proactive.
Hey, Candy, I have to ask you to wrap up. Anyone else for public comment on board action items?
Hi, I'm Jess Fields. Excuse me, I live in Eagleville. And I just have questions, and I'm not sure if this is the right forum. I've never been to a school board meeting. I have a son that's entering kindergarten next year, which is why I'm interested. On your timeline, I didn't hear when redistricting would happen for those 500 students to 1,000 students that would be affected. When would that factor in?
So I don't think we have any answers to anything because we haven't made any decisions. The timeline.
I thought it might have been in the timeline. Sorry.
The timeline was basically just on hearings that we would hold in order to consider the issue. So there's no plan yet for redistricting or anything because if we pass a motion, which hasn't been passed yet, we would direct the administration to develop that, and then we would hear that during the hearings, and then a decision would be made.
Okay, so because I understand that completely. So basically. June, July, we're looking. So then anything would be going further for redistricting would happen after all that other stuff was done.
So yeah, nothing happens this year, and nothing would happen for the summer once you follow the timeline through all the way. So May or June at the earliest would be any kind of vote if there was one.
Right. So then there's the potential to move all the kids around once they've been established.
Right.
Okay. And then. Well, I guess that answers my other question about the teachers too, because I'm not sure how many of you guys have ever been teachers. My big concern is I was a former high school teacher, and when we're looking at the capacity studies, as a middle school teacher and a high school teacher formerly, before I chose to stay home with my kids, floating, I mean, that's something that I really, I feel like, I'm not sure if you've ever been in a classroom with students. I'm emotional about it. I mean, and I have a kid that's 5. And that really concerns me about when we're looking at projections and why, if the enrollment's not necessarily going to change, why that's even being brought up.
So again, if we pass this motion tonight, all it is develop a plan, and then during the hearings that would happen at some point past 15 days from today, that plan will be presented, and then the public can comment on that, but we really can't comment on anything that we haven't seen yet, right? So Jim has just basically said that, floating is an option, just like lots of things are options, but we don't have anything in front of us concrete to discuss. So I really don't have an answer for you on what perspectives we haven't received a plan, because we haven't directed the administration to do a plan yet.
Right, and then, well, never mind. Okay. I'm not trying to be confrontational. I don't
think so at all.
I'm like, okay, how many of you guys have been teachers before? Like, how many of you have been in the classroom with the kids? Like, that's where I'm kind of.
And that's what the administration will have to take into consideration. It's not just space, but it's also the educational experience of the kids. So that absolutely will be if this passes, that will be what the administration will be directed to do, and they'll come back and present and both the board and the public will be able to comment on that at the hearings, and then a decision will be made post that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Additional public comment?
Andrea Reese, Lower Providence. Excuse the attire. I am a Montgomery County Public School teacher, and we had a special day today to honor counselors. So this is my special outfit to honor counselors. I won't get into all that. My comments might be better for public hearing, but I wanted to just get it out there while the room's not so crowded and not so negative that it could possibly get. I have 3 elementary school children. And I'm probably in the minority saying, and I know this is jumping the gun, I don't mind if they close a school. I don't mind if they redistrict, if this is what the board decides is best. I am a little nervous with things like cost cutting and raising class size, and these were just things mentioned, floating teachers, all those things. I'll be very honest in public and say I work for a respected Montgomery County public school who has made horrible decisions over the last 5 years. Horrible decisions that are hurting children. It scares me very much. So if whatever you all decide, if you're going to cost cut somewhere, make sure you improve things other places, other schools, in the curriculum, with how you treat your teachers. The other thing I would ask is a lot of times the people who speak are very small in number, and they're taxpayers, which are important people. I'm a taxpayer as well as a parent. But you don't always get the opinions of the people that work for your district. They might not live in the district, but they work there. And I've always been so proud of Methacton for the way it's treated its teachers, from what I see on the outside. So I would encourage all of you to speak to the teachers, even those teachers who do not live in Methacton. Because I cannot speak up where I teach, because I don't live where I teach. And that's a problem. So I would just encourage you to do that as well. And I do thank you for everything all of you do. And I do appreciate the President's comments about that we were looking out for the kids. If you could just keep that in mind. You know, things might not be happening for 6 months to 18 months, but when I hear things about the Skyview and Arcola, that makes me nervous. So you don't need to utilize every single inch of space, because we do have to keep in mind floating and the workplace for educators who are responsible for all these children. So thank you.
Thank you. Additional comment on board action items?
I'm Amy Gates, and I'm a parent, and I'm nervous, so bear with me. I know it's not the topic right now.
Can you say where you're from for the record?
Oh, Audubon. I know it's not the topic right now, but again, if part of the solution is sharing classrooms, I'm concerned for the kids. And for the teachers, but for the kids, their safety as teachers are changing from one room to another, and for their education because the teachers aren't prepping their rooms. So for me, if you get to that stage, that's part of the problem.
Thank you. Additional, okay.
My name is Janice Conger. I live in Lower Providence. Arrowhead is my home school. I also am the librarian at Skyview. First, one thing that was said about through the capacity study was that the computer lab off of the library was not used for instructional space. There's classes in there every period of every day. there is a technology teacher that teaches in that space. I'd love to have that as my library computer lab, but that's not the case. So please keep that in mind, that that is computer space. The other thing is, if it's a 6-month timeline, you are not giving students a chance to say goodbye to their school. And you can't do that to your kids. They need to have some closure. And 6 months timeline is not giving them enough closure. Please keep that in mind for the kids.
Thank you. Additional comments?
Hello, Karen Vavra, Worcester. I'll start with the easier conversation. That was the donor wall. Open for comment for the donor wall? Yeah. Dr. Zerbe, have there been any studies or review by your committee or your team or the fundraising professionals as to the return on investment for the wall? Meaning, do you expect increased contributions as you incent donors by this wall?
It's been noted by the NCS consultant that having these types of walls does increase the likelihood of people donating.
So if the cost is $20,000, and I don't think I remember, I was unclear on how you are asking the wall to be paid for. If the cost is $20,000, was there a percentage increase or some kind of return beyond $20,000 that you expect because of the wall?
I don't have such a percentage increase.
So no study like that was completed, or just your professional's opinion that it would actually increase contributions? Okay. And again, I wasn't clear. How are you asking for the wall to be paid for?
We'll be seeking donors to help us with the refurbishing and the purchase of materials.
Okay. Okay. You know, on the planning study, and I'm sure there's going to be plenty of time for comment on the financials around what closing a school will look like or closing 2 schools will look like, studies on, you know, the variable costs, the fixed costs, the return on those costs, and what capacity will look like. I listened to some of the teachers and the educators that spoke up, and it dawned on me that, you know, in any community or company for that matter, any large organization, layoffs and actions cause reaction and uncertainty. How will the board maintain top talent, you know, the educators at the schools and frankly in the district? How are you going to attract talent and keep talent for our children and for their education as we go through this unsettling process? It's something certainly to think about. I'd also really like to understand, you know, what the expense of all of this is going to cost. With any project where you look at closing something down or you're transforming or you're becoming more efficient, there is always an increased short-term expense for it. So I think we really need to understand that probably before the hearings get underway, and as you consider even doing it, what is it going to cost in an already stretched and fiscally tight budget for the school district to go through this process? You know, I heard Mr. Phillips say that he'd like to build more houses in the district. I would think that this activity and some of the other actions of this board in the last 6 months really is not attracting new families to our district. It's probably detracting families to our district. I think the board has a lot to consider, and all the heavy and expensive projects that you've undertaken in the last year really does affect our children and their education. And frankly, it affects our children because it affects their parents and how their parents pay their taxes. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Mr. Pickleman?
Joe Bickelman from Audubon. I was here for the enrollment study. I guess it was on January 20th, and now I'm here for the capacity study, and no offense to the person there, but I don't think we should have spent a nickel on having a third party do these projections. I think administration is capable of making enrollment projections. It's very simple. John Andrews spreadsheets is exactly what I used to do at Colonial School District. So there you have the enrollment projections, and the enrollment projections would have provided no need for the Skyview building, which we're $60 million in hock for. And the other thing is counting empty rooms. You have principals that you could have drew their expertise on, the administrators. So I don't think there was a need for a third party to say, close a school. I think we could have did it ourselves and saved that money. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else for additional comment on board action items? Okay, hearing none. We have a motion by Mr. Pellicano and a second by Ms. Hackett on the floor to direct the superintendent to schedule and advertise a public hearing on the question of the possible closing of Audubon and/or Arrowhead. Discussion. Any board discussion? No? Okay, seeing none, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor? Opposed? 8-0. Dr. Zerbe, if you would move forward with scheduling hearings and developing a consolidation plan for the board to consider. Again, I'd like to ask that we work through this process in a thoughtful and appropriate way. As such, I'd like to ask the public to understand that individual board members cannot engage on this topic on a one-on-one basis. So any questions or comments should be directed to me as the board spokesperson. Similarly, I'm asking Dr. Zerbe to direct any questions or immediate inquiries made to any of the administration to me as the board spokesperson. Thank you. Moving on to the donor recognition wall. So we have a request from Dr. Zerbe. So I guess I'll ask for a motion to approve the request, which is approval of the administration to develop plans for a donor recognition wall at a cost not greater than $20,000. Is there a motion? Mrs. Hackett, is there a second? Mrs. Barone, discussion? Mr. Pellicano?
I'd just like to ask Dr. Zerbe, how did the process go to identify the specific area that was selected, and were there other areas considered?
We toured the high school facilities, and we wanted to make sure that we had an area that was readily visible to attendees of sporting events. And we felt that that wall closest and behind the press box was probably the most traveled area during sporting events that occur in the stadium. And we felt that that was the most appropriate wall, and it also presented not only a location, but a physical structure that would allow us to make visible improvements on that wall.
Ms. Woodring?
Yeah, I guess I just need clarification on whether there is an end date to the capital campaign, or if this is going to be a wall that, obviously there's going to be ongoing costs with our facility, so is this going to be a wall that, say 5 years from now, if I wanted to donate $5,000, it would still be an active, ongoing wall?
Very good question. In a lot of our deliberation and work with NCS and with also our Phase 2 committee, we're trying to finalize those particular phases and put into consideration that certainly there will be a point in time where we'll have to identify that cutoff so that we can decide whether or not we're going to have the $1,000 inscriptions going, say horizontally, or those 3 vertical areas, and then we would create a mechanism for us as donors would give on their contribution level to continue adding their names to the wall. That is the intent. There's certainly some additional work that needs to take place, but for the purposes of moving forward with Phase 2, the motion was before you this evening because it coincides with the Phase 2 opportunity of giving through our website, as last discussed at our public meeting, using RevTrack, which is a software product that allows individuals to make contributions with the use of a credit card. So we want to coincide this opportunity to get the recognition for these donors on a wall, but we still do, quite frankly, have additional legwork to get this thing in place and set the parameters more definitively. And we can certainly communicate those back to the board once the committee has thoroughly reviewed them and can make their final recommendation. But we certainly wouldn't want to bring before, or offer the opportunity for recognition without the board's approval of the matter.
I actually had two questions. One I think you answered during the presentation. I know the mock-ups that you showed were not what necessarily they would look like named, but to your point, there would be opportunity for the wall itself to be a naming opportunity to cover the cost. So that's correct. And then I guess this other question I had, and I'm not sure, and Greg, I think you were on the committee, so maybe you have some insight. All for this, I think we need to recognize donors. What do we do about folks that have given less than $1,000?
And I could just say, based on the current discussion that the committee's had, is we were looking at the $1,000 level as being the cutoff, for purposes of recognition on the wall. Could there be some other type of recognition outside the wall? Probably that's something we'd have to think about, but we were trying to come up with what would be a reasonable number to be on the wall, and then figuring out another way to recognize them off the wall, so to speak.
If I would just add to that, one example that was suggested was making their contribution known on the district's website in some facet within the area of the field. So Greg's absolutely right. We just need to work through some of that, but the cutoffs are as the presentation presents them, and we just need your approval to move forward with this process.
Okay, good.
I have a comment I'd like to make on that. And the fact that one thing I do not like about this so far now, and maybe the committee has more work to do on that, is that you have folks out there who are probably ready and willing to give, but they can't afford $1,000 or don't want to give $1,000. They may want to give $100 or $200. I strongly suggest that we come up with a way to honor that, and I'm not talking about something on a website. I mean, you can sell bricks for pavers. I mean, there's whole different options for that type of stuff. Make walks, all kinds. I definitely think you should do that. I would like to see a more complete plan other than just the giving wall of $1,000 or more. I think if you're doing that type of plan, you need to have the other plan going all the way down to whatever it is, $100, $150, $200. I mean, you start adding all that stuff up, and it starts. I mean, if you're going to be putting in a sidewalk or some type of paving thing anyway, you might as well have it. There's a whole bunch of different ways of handling that. So I'd like to see something on that. Unless has the committee done any work on that front yet?
With regards to bricks, that was where the original idea started. And in fact, there was much discussion relative to that. There was presumably some activity years ago with regards to selling bricks for some type of improvements to the stadium field. I'm not exactly certain what came about all of that. All I can tell you is there are some bricks in and about the area of where the press box is today. In our investigation, we discovered that it is much more expensive to do a brick campaign, and therefore using the plan that's in front of you relative to the giving wall and using plaques and having multiple names inscribed on those is a much more cost-effective and equally, provides equal notoriety. In fact, being on the wall, we believe it attracts more attention to those that have given.
So you're not going to have any recognition for anybody who wants to donate $500 or something like that?
I don't think we've said that. We haven't determined what type of recognition we should provide to those individuals. Certainly everyone, whether it's from $1 to whatever amount, should be recognized because it's our feeling that everyone that wants to be a part of this process. We're just saying for this particular wall, we've set some thresholds that we'd like the board to approve this evening so that we can move forward with this phase of the giving. If in the future we find ways to recognize everybody, we can bring that back to the board for their consideration. If it's something, but it won't be on the wall, at least at this point in the game.
Right. Okay. All right. I just don't like the way that that's being done. I think you gotta you got to look at all the parties involved, all the families who want to be part of this. You know, they may not have a lot of money, they want to be something, and I think they should be recognized. I mean, it's been done over and over again through countless of other organizations, and I think that if we don't have a plan to address that, I think we're shortchanging ourselves. I really do. Not only you're cutting people out from possibly who want to be, you know, put something down there and just not write a check and have it be swallowed up by a $5.7 million project.
Well, I certainly think it's a fair point, and we can certainly go back to the committee and ask for other recommendations, you know, maybe between the wall and the website.
Well, yeah, I'd just like to answer it. Nobody said that there's folks under $1,000 aren't going to be recognized. We're trying to figure out a way to recognize them in the most appropriate way to give them the recognition. It's just that we had to come up with something where there's a cutoff for what level you need to be on the wall. Certainly there's going to be other mechanisms that we can give to the other folks who give $10, $15, $100, whatever the number is. We have to figure all that out. We had to come up with a number of what makes sense for the wall.
Any other questions?
Yes. How does this relate to the naming rights that we've talked about before?
I guess specifically what I was wondering is if you donate to get a naming right, does that mean you on the wall, or is this is kind of the next level underneath that, correct?
The naming rights are really something that is separate from just a straight-ahead donation. So what you need to understand is the naming rights is really a relationship between a donation and an advertisement of some sort, and potentially in return. So, for example, naming rights of the scoreboard. There may be the name of the ABC company on the bottom of the scoreboard, where they would have they would pay a particular fee as outlined in our schedule, and they would then have that advertisement as a return.
So you're considering those advertisements as opposed to contributions?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Additional comments?
May I ask, the pricing, as I recall, and I may be wrong, was for the recognition between 1,000 and 5,000? Or was it anyone above 5,000?
I think it was 1,000 one time or 5,000 over a multiple period.
Yeah, okay. So it's a fairly narrow dollar range, meaning it's $1,000 up to 5,000. So something less than 20 contributions would pay for the wall. Because unless everybody, you get 21,000, you're going to get less than 20 names. So I'm wondering, how many names are you planning to have for capacity on this? And what's the committee's target or goal in terms of how many contributions at those levels, 1 to 5,000, are you hoping to get through your efforts?
Just to clarify that, it would also include, the giving wall will also include those donations of $250,000 and greater, and all the other donor clubs, which include $100,000 to $249,000, $50,000 to $99,000. So there's several clubs that will be also on this wall. So it just will not be the 1,000 and the 5,000 givers. The structure of how that will all play out is still yet to be determined, in the sense that when we set our target dates for these giving areas, we need to then adjust the plaques in order to accommodate what those projections are, and then retrofit the space that's available to us with those size plaques. That work still needs to be done. We are looking for that work to be done in the very near future. Again, not all the details are particularly worked out on this, other than the fact that we know that these thresholds will allow us to establish an opportunity once the online giving component is released in the very near future to have this recognition to be a part of someone's contribution at these levels.
And I'll just add, Peter, so we're trying to, again, until we get the information, is to we look at those big plaques on those big areas, and then you looked at that other design that's a horizontal. Honestly, we don't actually have the number of actually names or small plaques that could fit on there. We need to get that, because that'll help to give us some idea as to what the universe may end up being. That's we can fit on there at any given point in time. So we don't necessarily have that yet, but we expect to have that soon.
Okay, thank you. So that, we're really voting on the concept.
We're voting on the concept, and we're saying, don't go spend more than $20,000. And by the way, you have to come back to us with a contract anyway, so, you know, we have the opportunity to...
Yeah, and I don't want to beat this up, but
Yeah.
if, for example, there were more above 5,000, meaning that you needed more larger plaques, would the 20,000 be adjusted that way? Would you have to spend more in order to accommodate that? What's the 20,000? Well, regardless of what you do, it won't be more than 20,000, you said.
Well, at this point, we've made a general estimate, and based on what we know at this moment in time, we need to do a little bit more research and certainly and determine some of these factors. I think in the end, if we find that our contribution is going to way exceed what we initially planned for, and it will require us to spend more, then we would come back, or I would come back to the board and ask for us to adjust this particular level. But I think it would be unfair for us to go into this without some type of catch-all to at least get us started, so that we know that what position we're working from. So if we need to adjust, we can come back to the board with those recommendations and seek your approval.
Okay, last question. So the 20,000 or thereabouts is being funded from existing contributions?
We're going to be looking for someone to name this wall, and to be.
So this could be the Peter McFarland giving donor wall, and you could give 20,000.
Get your checkbook out.
And then fund the whole thing. I'm using you as an example, not saying I'm waiting for a check.
Well, if there's a bust, I want hair on it. So my point is, there will not be any operational funds used for this purpose.
There's no intent to do that. Though it may seem premature for us to bring this before you with not all the details ironed out, it would also be months in the future before we would actually understand better how this wall might actually play out. Because we are still in, if you recognize where we're at in this giving process, we only kicked things off in early November. And phase 2 is just ramping up. And we believe that the activities and the momentum of phase 2 will help perpetuate areas of giving that we have yet not to realize. And at the end of the day, the plans that we have here before you may need to be adjusted. There's no question.
So let me get this straight. We're voting on just the concept of this, right? But we're not using any district funds to pay for it, correct? And then why does the board vote needed on this?
Because we have to give direction to...
Well, because we're using a structure of the district, and we're giving recognition to individuals who are making contributions. The properties are owned by the district. The board, therefore, determines the use and how we would provide any advertisements or recognitions on property within the district. So that's why we're seeking your approval this evening, so that we can move forward with the concept, gather the proper details that you have asked for this evening, and be able to come back at a future date, not anytime real soon, but at a future date, to give you an updated cost, an updated set of details that will provide you with the information you so request today. But if we don't have the approval or desire for the board to provide recognition to the donors, we therefore are going to scrap the idea and find something else to do. But it's of my opinion that we must recognize our donors, and therefore this donor wall is one inexpensive and proper mechanism to do that.
Other questions? I think we've pretty well beaten that to death. All right, we have a motion and a second to approve the concept of the donor recognition wall for the Warrior Pride Capital Campaign in recognition of individual campaign donors as presented. Thought being not exceed $20,000, and we would find a donor to donate to cover that. If there's no other discussion, I'll ask for a vote. All those in favor? Opposed? 8-0. Okay, moving on to the next item, resignations for retirement. Mr. Harney?
Mr. We have 15 professional retirements for your approval this evening. Just note that we'll be also inviting those folks back like we do every year in the spring for that, when we honor all of our retirees. And I just wanted to make that point because we're kind of doing this kind of early, but we want to give the opportunity for planning to begin.
Terrific. Mrs. Hackett, you had a motion you wanted to make?
Yes, I'd like to make a motion that we accept the following resignations for retirement effective at the end of the 2014-15 school year in accordance with the retirement incentive plan offered this year. And there's a list of 15 professional employees.
Is there a second? Mrs. Woodring? So the motion, which has been seconded, is to accept the following resignations as presented in conjunction with the early retirement incentive plan. Any board discussion? Seeing none?
Real quick, I recognize some of these names immediately, and I just want to say they're some top-notch people here.
Absolutely. Certainly deserve our thanks. Any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? 8-0. It's approved. That brings us through all of the items on the special meeting that will take us to courtesy of the floor. Once again, I'll open the floor to residents of the district. Ask that you share your name and general area of residence for the record and keep your comments to 3 minutes. Courtesy of the floor.
My name is Diana Kernup. I'm not a resident of the school district, but as the MEA co-president, I've always been afforded the opportunity to speak. As I was sitting here listening to what you have to undertake, I don't envy you. And I was thinking about my family's association and my association with the district. My family's lived here since 1955, and the next generation has moved in. I have a niece that started at Worcester on Monday. And so she will definitely be impacted by all you do. And I was remembering how I've been impacted in my lifetime with the decisions that the boards have had to make. Because when I started at Worcester in first grade, there were no kindergartens. Of course, that's telling you how old I am. And it was a K-8 building. And we didn't send our children to a Methacton High School. They went to Norristown or Lansdale. And you built and you joined and you made a jointure between the two townships. And it was a tenuous arrangement. It has not always been a pleasant or a positive relationship, which is one of the reasons that you changed the name of the school district to the Methacton School District. And I'm hopeful as you move forward in whatever you have to do, that I know you have to look at the dollars and cents. And I know that you will want to care about the children and the community members, whether they're parents or taxpayers. But it is a tenuous situation that you are going to do as you move forward, that as you look at the studies and you share things, there ought to be things that are analyzed on what you're doing to kids and how you are going to help those children go to other buildings and feel a part of those buildings. Having been a part of buildings that have, when I came to work here, you had 5 elementary buildings. During my tenure here, you closed buildings. Then you opened buildings. Then you opened Skyview. I'm not sure what you'll do by the time I retire. But each of those has an emotional issue for all the participants and stakeholders in those buildings. And the most precious of those are your kids. And we need to find ways as you redistrict, which is probably what you would need to do, to keep the children whole. The staff will work to be resilient, but you need to keep the children and the cultures that each of them brings from their sending elementary buildings and keep that richness that they have, or there will be problems as you join. I don't envy you your decision, and please take care of the kids.
Thank you. Courtesy of the floor, Candy.
Candy Alaba, Eggerville. I'm sitting here listening, you're discussing putting up a wall and recognizing people that donate money to the field project. Back in May and June, Mr. Andrews and I had both, on a number of occasions, asked the school board to honor and recognize J.P. Mascara for the almost $250,000 he donated to refurnish the baseball field, which is beautiful, and I'm sure it was $250,000 by the time he had the dedication ceremony and all the food and drinks that he put out for the public. We asked a number of times, you're more worried about honoring and recognizing the people that donate to the field project. This company stepped up with almost $250,000, refurnished, put in a beautiful baseball field, and a terrace honoring one of the alumni from the Methacton School District, Robert Childress. You didn't even publicly say thank you. So instead of worrying about the people who are going to give $25 or $100, you should publicly have Pat Sr. and Pat Jr. attend a school board meeting, publicly recognize them, give them a plaque, and thank them for their generous donation to the students of this school district. Because what I'm hearing tonight is, well, we have to worry about the students. It's for the students. I've heard this for 9 years. That was for the students. That was a generous contribution to the school district, and it's embarrassing that it was never recognized. So before you start worrying about people that may donate in the future, you need to recognize a company that is rooted in this township, who has done a lot of good, donated a lot of money, and taken care of a lot of people. And you need to publicly have them here and say thank you for what they've done for this school district. Because if you don't, they may never be generous again in the future when you need money.
Additional courtesy of the floor? Winnie?
Because I'm so short, I'm standing up here. Thanks, Christian. I'd like to make some comments about the appeal.
Can you just state your name and...
Oh, sorry.
You know the drill, Winnie. Come on.
Yeah, I do. Winnie Hayes, Worcester Township. Do you need my address? 30. Okay, fine.
I've already got it.
All right, good. I'm fine. So I recently sent a letter to all the school board directors and to Dr. Zerby. And it was a letter concerning the school district's appeal of the conditional use decision made by Worcester Township. And in that letter, I asked the school board to reconsider that appeal and to consider withdrawing it. And I'd like to go on public record. First, I have two kids who've graduated from Methacton High School, Matt Hayes and Katie Hayes, now Katie Greco. I currently have two grandchildren who are students in Methacton School District, and will soon have a third child in Methacton School District, grandson. So I want to make clear that I think it's long overdue to restore our athletic fields. I'm 100% behind it. I also want to make clear it's long past time that we had lighted fields so that we have the ability to have night games. So I'm 100% behind that. What I'm not behind is the continued expenditure of taxpayer money to appeal a decision that really was a compromise that gave the district some of what they're looking for and also gave the neighbors some of what they were looking for. And I'd like to make a couple of points. First off, I'm a scientist. That's my business. There was no evidence presented that were scientific studies documenting injury rates higher on 50-foot candle versus 30-foot candle of fields of our size. Everything that was presented, both by the township and by the school district, were opinion, expert opinion, no studies, no hard data. Given that, the township ruled to give 50-foot candles for the large athletic field and 30-foot for the ancillary field. The ancillary field has limited capacity for seating, and the foot candle decisions are largely driven by the need for spectators to be able to view the play. There are very limited seats in the ancillary seats. Another decision point that the school district objects to is berming, fencing, and landscaping. Let me point something out. If you're worried about student safety, not being able to control unauthorized access to those fields at night by opposing team students, by other people who might bring alcohol, might bring drugs, might even bring weapons onto school grounds because you haven't secured the school grounds, is also a safety risk. But right along with that, I'm thinking of the money we're spending. We've spent between the township and the school district well over several $100,000 now. That money can go into the project itself. It's delaying it, and it's causing division within our township. We need to heal the township. We need to put this aside. I have not seen one athletic schedule come out that shows that having 8 fields a week that are lit, because it's 4 nights, 2 fields each, that 8 lit fields is not going to satisfy our scheduling problems. So I'm going on record as saying I'm tired of seeing my taxpayer dollars go to fund litigation for both the township's position and the school district's position. This is craziness. We need to get beyond this, get the fields repaired and built, and put up the lights. But do away with the appeal, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Additional courtesy of the floor? Okay, hearing none, I'll ask for a motion to adjourn. Mr. Phillips, second. Mr. Roth, all those in favor? Opposed? We stand adjourned.